kill you.
Hey everybody, and welcome back to Zaku Talk. I am your host, Patrick Skeyhill. This season, G versus Wing, and that means my host is Bob Balaban Skerry.
I'm intentionally holding my finger to our dear friend Skeyhill because I don't know what the fuck a Balaban is.
You don't know Bob Balaban? Who Bob Balaban is? Did they show you?
What?
Have you seen?
What other world did you come from?
Have you seen any Wes Anderson film?
It's been a long time since I've sat down willingly to a Wes Anderson.
Then I won't have you do an impression of Bob Balaban. Okay, we'll just sort of go into the show and talk about episode 28 of both episodes. But before we do that, Bob, how's your week been going?
It was fine as of last week. Going through, we get to the weekend. It's pretty okay. And then Wednesday rolls around. And at the time of recording, I found myself incredibly angry on Wednesday, the 6th of January, 2021. I didn't time travel just now. 2020 would have been a dream comparatively. And due to the events of the insurrectionists, I was filled with such rage and anxiety that I stayed up until 5 a.m. building this Valkylander, Parvis's mobile suit from Gundam Build Divers Re-Rise.
True. Mm-hmm.
It is a transforming Gundam model.
Also true.
So that gave me something to focus on instead of having my brain go into what I like to call fuck mode.
Yeah, so, there's that messiness. We don't need to go further into at the moment, though it may come up later. But also, Hollywood's sort of shutting down productions again. SAG is about to pull SAG-AFTRA members out of productions. Netflix has shut down. Other studios are about to follow suit. That, of course, means my pilots are being delayed for the moment. Does not slow down my animation. Part of why I picked that project to do for this year. A little bit of COVID-proof. But, other than that, so I'm just sort of now focusing all my attentions on that and keeping up with the cast of those sitcom pilots just to make sure they're still engaged as we try to reschedule. Well, so that's what's been going on with us this week, though, Bob. But more importantly than country burning down, we have episode 28 to discuss of both G Gundam and Gundam Wing. So, Bob, why don't you give us a summary? What's going on with G Gundam this week?
Certainly. Episode 28 of G Gundam, Domon Targeted, the Assassin's Staff, or in Japanese, Narawareta Domon, Kuroshiya Fighter no Hisatsuken. So it is very similar. The first part of Domon Targeted, it literally it goes in a different order in Japanese of Targeted Domon.
Yeah.
And then Hitman Fighter's Special Sword is what the latter half of that is, as opposed to the Assassin's Staff, because I think they wanted to surprise everyone, even though if you're watching the end sequences from the episode prior, you see that there's a hidden sword within the Assassin's Staff. So,
But as you know, audience, I strongly do not recommend watching those. Stay away if you can.
Yes. Schwarzbruder fights the Viking Gundam, easily defeating it. Domon's next opponent, Kirill Mekirel, is an assassin who has won all of his matches by default by killing his opponents before the matches. Attacking Domon, he fails to assassinate Domon. Again, this is what is written here. It is revealed in the past Kirill had participated in another Gundam fight where he lost his eyesight after lowering his guard. Angry at the Gundam fight, he returned for revenge. Schwartz gives Domon advice for the match. During the fight, Domon is able to overcome his fear of Kirill's techniques, overcoming it. They then face in a deciding duel, with Kirill being defeated. At the last moment, he saw Domon's friends supporting him and hesitated. Kirill then leaves to help the families of his victims.
All right. Yep. There you go. I remember all that happening. So pretty succinct there. Well, over here in Gundam Wing episode 28, we have Passing Destinies, or in the Japanese, Sure Chigao Unmei. Is that close?
It's pretty close. Sore Chigao Unmei. which is literally translated destiny to pass each other. So passing destinies.
I'm into that.
It's a more succinct feel, as you said earlier.
Yes. And over here we have a recap episode, this time from the point of view of Treize and, in quotations, Lady Un. Well, Bob, in episode 28, Viking Gundam comes in a ship, and thank God has a non-ship form, because I was thinking as I was watching this battle, well, how did he fight in the mountains? And then I thought, why would you build, if you're Norway, build a Gundam that couldn't fight on land when half of your competition is going to be on land? But they're back at our faithful, checkered fighting ring on the water. Mm-hmm. But he comes on the land anyway. He's got legs, it seems, but doesn't matter because German guy's got Ninja Gundam techniques, and he switches with the boat thing, beats him up. I actually like seeing these other Gundam, the non-main character, fight their Gundam rounds. I wish they put more of a challenge up and see them kind of struggle and get to watch them grow. But there's a lot of episodes left. I think there's some of those anyway, if I'm remembering correctly. So I'm sure they'll come up soon. I have
answers about that soon.
Well, there you go. And I understand why they didn't put this in the episode. I don't think you need it. I would like it. If I redid it, I would sort of talk about these other nations and people being, I don't know, suspicious of one guy's opponents continuously dropping dead throughout the tournaments and trying to investigate it. I get the Chinese or fat man from Hong Kong doesn't have to give a shit because he's running the show, but I would like to see other people be kind of like annoyed and protesting this. Though, interesting that they picked Nepal, pretty much only famous for its weird flag and impoverished status, as being a major Gundam player, though it's kind of a cool-looking Gundam outside of a couple of weird paint choices.
To that, I have to ask, remind me if I am mistaking this, is Nepal not where the Dalai Lama lives, where that sect of monks resides?
Yeah, so they're both Nepal and Tibet in the Himalayas. Tibet slightly north of Nepal. The Dalai Lama was there, then China wanted it, and for some years he was out in Nepal, some years he's caught by them, and that's sort of the whole big conflict that happens with that. But mostly, Nepal's famous for a good chunk of its population making 50 cents a day and surviving in their Himalayan mountain climate.
Also, I ask because with Nepal, I was working under the assumption, unfortunately, I was confusing it for Tibet. So I was like, why is one of the most seemingly pacifist-led countries so interested in being a group of assassins and power mongering individuals? That was probably the part that confused me most, besides the other point. How has nobody called the police, especially during the daylight assassination attempt in the middle of Hong Kong?
Yes. So, okay. I'm glad you have a problem with it, too, because I want that to be a bigger thing.
Of course I do.
Where the other nations are like, dude, why do all of our Gundam fighters die when they're facing this dude? Fat. Are you going to do something about it? And then he can be like, no, and like, fine. But like, I would like to see that moment where other people, the other nations sort of matter to our story and have thoughts and feelings of their own. I wonder, though, Bob, if it's like meant to be a stand-in for Tibet, but they couldn't use Tibet because of what's going on with China. I don't know how Japan and China are feeling about that. But interestingly enough, they give it the term, the Mandala Gundam, where Nepal, in the medieval period, in that time, it was actually called Nepal Mandala and was sort of like a warlike kind of Mongol-like tribe before they were conquered by the Shahs from the Middle East for a little bit. So it could be a deep cut back into that fun fact about an obscure nation.
I mean, I would say that you're probably right there. Now, because you've brought it up enough times, I am going to let you know, as I mentioned a few episodes back, I've gone back to my DVDs because I'm not going to shell out for, I think, the fourth or fifth streaming service that I would be attached to.
Yeah.
So I am no longer trying to watch on Crunchyroll.
Okay.
Because watching with ads is horrendous. They don't do anything to properly buffer them. And so it takes triple the amount of time to get through an ad than it should, right?
Yeah, I say that's interesting because most streaming services I use prioritize the commercials over the actual content, where the commercial might be looking a little fuzzy, but once it goes to that commercial break, that is a crisp, clean commercial.
I personally think it has something to do with them not having the right file size or type when they're putting it through.
Okay.
And so whatever server they're putting it through or whatever is just crumbling it. Or if you want to get real tin hat about it, they're intentionally trying to do it that way so that you're forced to choose premium. Regardless of that, I will say that because I'm on the DVDs, I did stumble back into looking at that disc's G files. Yeah. So I'll return to form here. And at some point, I'm going to see if I can't scour the net for if I can just find all of them at once instead of having to try and take pictures of my TV screen.
Okay.
But I guess the intent with the episodes that we've been going through so far is meant to be a little more episodic in order to create a juxtaposition from the direct drama that we were dealing with for the first half of the series. Instead of it being this staggering between the several characters, with Domon being a sort of player in this greater story, we've now decided to hone in on him because we want to make sure that he is still developing. It's not that we're watching Goku, who is just, oh, I am Gary Stu, raw, hair turns gold.
Yeah.
He is learning from this rival of his who is acting as a mentor in lieu of his Master Asia. Master Asia is rooting for him so he can beat the hell out of him later on in the series. And we're seeing that there is something that is important to and about Domon, and we're trying to eke that out episode by episode. In the same way with the villains, rather than fleshing them out like we have with a lot of these other ones, the director Imagawa just went, yeah, well, we're doing this more for Domon's sake, so instead let's just make them interesting. Let's just flavor them to hell, cover them in sauce, and put them out there.
So it's a quick comment on that is I think that's the advantage of the shonen style show you have, where that is sort of what we come for. You obviously would want to spend here because this is the hook of your show. Hey, Gundam martial arts battle. Like that's how the commercials go. So yeah, take the time you need here. That's fine.
Yeah. So I was just going to say, there's a reason why we have a Wan Yun Fat here and why his name is constantly trying to pull me to Chow Yun Fat.
Uh-huh.
Imagawa loves Chow Yun Fat.
Oh, well, there you go. Easy.
100%, and wanted to name him directly Chow Yun Fat and is inspired by Chow Yun Fat, but they decided to change it up just enough by making him instead of Chow Yun Fat, it's Wan Yun Fat. Yeah. And he's still got most of the same flavor as this person, except for his, I think it's literally his sunglasses and his coat that hangs over his shoulders are the two things that are supposed to distinct him from Chow Yun Fat, but otherwise is almost exactly the same in terms of tone and personality. Okay. They also wanted to have someone younger than Master Asia because most people would expect that our mastermind player here would be an old guy or someone who is a corrupt politician of some kind from the get-go, someone who is blatantly clearly that, as opposed to someone with this level of charisma. And this person who seems to be a tad impetuous with the way he chooses to depict himself as this youthful individual.
All right. Well, there you go. Look at that. These G files are paying for themselves.
Yes. Were there any other points that you wanted to talk about involving our blind assassin monk?
Yes. So in his backstory, we get to see his older Gundam, which is like Wolverine with a cool hat. And it fights a Mastodon Gundam. What country do you think that was from?
Well, I have a suspicion as to who it was because of the way in which the attack was handled and specifically the generation of the fight that was being done. That was the 11th fight. Mm-hmm. That was the last fight before we got into the war. Do you remember? Fun little quiz for people, and I'm going to let Skeyhill linger on this. Do you remember who won the 11th Gundam fight.
And we're in the 13th Gundam fight now?
We're in 13th right now.
All right, so I think, is it Chapman?
Yes, it would be Gentle Chapman.
Okay. I do remember.
I believe, especially due to what we've already learned and what we may learn in the future, I believe that that person who fought our Neo-Nepal individual was Gentle Chapman, using several guns and using his scenery to his advantage in that moment.
Okay, and Britain was like, yeah, fucking mastodons, let's do it.
No, not that wasn't the mastodon that fought him. He fought a mastodon,
I see. Okay.
As well as a bunch of these other things. We were seeing his previous wins. We don't get to see the Gundam that was in front of the sun as he was being shot at.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
But we do see that several shots from above come down while using the sun as a way to create a glare.
Yeah.
And the explosions from within his cockpit are what blinds him. So the fact that all those things apply without any other knowledge ahead and only using knowledge from behind, I would posit that it's Gentle Chapman. And
a perfectly fine theory. I'm fine with it. That seems cool. But then, so he's blinded and now wants revenge on the Gundam tournament by playing in the Gundam tournament.
He wants revenge on the Gundam tournament, on the Gundam fight, by killing those who would use it to potentially do what he now has done, which is cheat. He feels that he was wronged in the fight. It cost him his sight. He was kicked out from his order, and he had to go many years outside of that. So during that time, he trained as an assassin. From that point forward, he tried to get himself into a position that Neo-Nepal would pick him up and allow him to become their fighter so he could just assassinate people. So is it really any different from any other revenge story like Kill Bill for the more modern crowd?
Well, Kill Bill sort of makes sense, right? So this person caused her husband's death, so she kills him and his assassins that made that happen. This one, it feels like if you want to get revenge against the tournament, I don't know, you kill the people running the tournament, you make the tournament not happen.
Yeah, but the difference is you're either going to go up against what is effectively the UN outright, or you're picking off fighters who are in this thing, right? They're in the fight. And while it is suspicious that it's always against the Neo-Nepalese individual, it does not mean that walking around in Hong Kong, you're not going to get mugged, stabbed, what have you. So the implication here is that without hard evidence that it is our guy here, Kirill, we can't confirm it. And so it maybe leaves nations at unease. But unless somebody's keeping an eye on Kirill at all times, who, as we've seen, is a powerful assassin monk to the point where he can focus all his senses on his big toe and float around on a single leaf in the middle of the ocean.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah, he has become the most anime of assassins. He can do that to show off. He can cut a candle in perfect quarters, but leave the flame intact on the wicks of these. He can cut away all the flames of all the other candles in the blink of an eye, but doesn't think, let me kill off, since I want to sort of just kill a bunch of people, let me kill off all the fighters I'm not facing and then beat the fighters I am facing in my mech, so it looks much less suspicious. Let me not go after Domon in broad daylight to get rid of him where a million people can see me when I've been getting away with murder so far. But then let me go on the leaf and sort of challenge him fairly to a duel because he respected Domon, or like what happened in that scene?
So my understanding is that because he failed in his assassination attempt, he would have to just try to defeat him in a fight as opposed to attempt another assassination. I'm not saying that every point of the logic is sound. Far from it. What I am saying is there is a kind of logic being used by a killer. This person is trying to use their understanding of the assassin world, while also being sure to apply himself in his revenge story here. He is being paid and allowed to use this giant machine that he can't even see from within, right? We just have to assume that he has all these other heightened senses, which is problematic, by the way, for those who are listening. Just because your senses are heightened doesn't mean that you become a superhuman, and we're not trying to push away one's disabilities here. But using these assumptions for 1995, 94?
94.
Yeah, 94, I think. Using these assumptions from this time period of a future, we can assume that he has to balance a bunch of these points. And because nobody's necessarily able to acknowledge who Kirill is quite yet, because he's moving so fast, he can cut through water, he can appear and disappear at a moment's notice. It is difficult to pin Kirill down as being an assassin. He's certainly dangerous. They know that he is a capable fighter. We do not know that he is an assassin other than the Neo-Nepalese government.
The one of the earliest jokes I tried to do in sitcom form when I started trying to go with that medium in like middle school. It was like a very early idea. The earliest version of this Cheers in a comic book shop idea I had because I was hanging around TJ's, with that group. And it was like this, like a guy shows up at the store and he's blind. So another guy like just assumes he's a martial arts master and like goes to punch him and then like actually punches him because he's just a blind guy. And like it becomes this whole like, this Larry David kind of blowout thing. I agree. It seems an odd trope that we got into the 80s and 90s that came out of a lot of these martial arts style movies. It's a good way to create an underdog and make us feel that he's cool. But as time goes on, we need to realize mostly just an act of fiction. Mostly. Yeah,
I will say that it's been popularized specifically due to a film franchise that was very popular in Japan, Zatoichi.
Is Ichi the killer?
No, not Ichi the Killer. There was a very popular serial in Japan, Serial, not like it's not Animeos, kids, but there was a live action series of films meant to follow in the way of Kurosawa and the like called Zatoichi. Zatoichi, the blind swordsman, played very similarly to what we would ascribe to your typical Western. Now, or at that time, and when I say that, I'm also understanding that a lot of the Westerns would eventually try to rip from Kurosawa's playbooks, right?
But Kurosawa borrowed from them first, so they've actually been trading back and forth over the years.
I'll give you that. But getting back to the point of Zatoichi was a blind swordsman. I believe he was a Ronin at this point. Not that they explicitly say that, I believe, in the film.
Yeah.
But he goes to a village. He is being bullied by the sighted samurai or hooligans or what have you. And he fights them diligently and capably without the use of his sight. And, considering this film came out in like the 50s or 60s, it's a marvel that this person is capable of doing all these things. And it also has a lot of the over the top kinds of blood spray and the like that do call back to kabuki style. And I'm forgetting the other type of staged medium that Japanese used. I'm sorry?
No,
NOH. Yes. No theater. Correct. It calls back to that style of over the top visual in order to really get the feeling across, even if it doesn't come across as realistic. But the first film was so popular that sequel after sequel, continuing this story went along. There were, dwindling dividends rather. Over time, they did do a couple of like rehashes, and I don't believe they've done a recent reboot, but that's, beyond my knowledge. Point being, Zatoichi, it was so popular that a lot of other filmmakers started taking a note from that and creating the blind swordsman archetype.
There you go. And then it looks like Domon beats, like he overcomes fear, something like that. But also the assassin feels Domon's friendship, and that's why he changes his ways. Is that what I'm supposed to take away?
That is how that summary depicts it. I do believe that it's him just being able to pierce through the darkness in his heart. I'm going to wax a little poetically here. Piercing through the darkness in his heart in order to allow him to see the error of his ways and causing him to atone. I don't know whether or not they say it the way that this summary said it for you in your dub, but in the sub that I was watching, he just said that he was going to atone for his sins. Now, atoning for one's sins here, especially since he is also made to look similar to the archetype of a standard monk.
Yep.
It doesn't mean that he's necessarily going to help those families. It could mean that he's going to fight on behalf of those who cannot fight for themselves. He is going to wander the world and try to understand what it is that he's done wrong while paying of his life.
Yeah, so I don't know if they use the phrase atone for their sins specifically. At the very least, that was the implication. But they use the phrase he's going to go assist the families of the people he's killed, to which I thought, all of them from all around the world? How's he going to have time to do that and travel? What's the plan there?
The plan there is people who have watched the television series Kung Fu, a bit of another appropriative property here.
Okay, gotcha. All right, well, that's a reference I don't get. Yeah. But, it's very sort of a shonen-y model, so fine. Like, you're doing it. You got a fun battle. The Mandala Gundam breaks into balls, because I guess they were magnetically linked when it's defeated. He was a flavorful-looking character. He was the most fun of them so far. There you go. And then next week, more battles, which is fine because this is sort of what I signed up for anyway.
I'm not going to tell you the title of next week's episode. Yeah. And I'm not going to give you the implication of what the story is supposed to revolve around.
Okay.
I do want to tell you what Gundam we're going to go into.
Like who Domon's opponent's going to be?
I don't know if it's necessarily going to be Domon's opponent because it might be the character that is also going to be highlighted in that episode.
Okay.
But we're going to be fighting against the Mermaid Gundam. Which is more like a gill man. It's like a fish wrapped around an aquatic themed humanoid.
Okay. Who you know what? No spoilers. That's fine. Okay. I'll wait and see a mermaid guy. So they have to fight under battle, or is this going to be on land and like half their battles are like their disadvantage? I'll save it for the episode. It's fine. It's fine. I just love that you're like I'm so confused and a little angry, but you know what? No, it's fine. I'm gonna hold it. It's fine. That's what I wanted from you. So thank you for giving me. I have some thoughts immediately, but let the show do its thing, and then I'll be confused afterwards. That's fine. Well, let me get some thoughts in here about Gundam Wing. Yes. All right. So we go to our second recap episode. Mm-hmm. As you said, it's a recap episode. I'm not going to go picking and poking at everything, but I am curious about your take on the interpretation of the events that have passed from the perspective of Treize. And you know, I'm going to just go ahead and jump into something that happens towards the end. Are we to believe that Lady Une may actually be on Earth now, as opposed to having been dead, or is that supposed to be some sort of a prelude to a level of psychoses? He's already cabin feverish, even though he's only been inside the place for maybe 3 hours. Yeah, so here's the unfortunate thing about that, because up until then, for a recap episode, it's actually spot on. I'm actually moved every time when he says, "Rest in peace, my lady." He has this rose, he has this flower. The way the English voice actor does it, like you feel he has lost this woman that he loved. And like you're moved by it, and like he has to go on despite it, this low that he already has. And then this image seems to appear behind him that it looks like Lady Une, and much like Hero glowing and having the heart of space in him, it never comes up again. So, and it's never addressed. And if it is sort of a psychosis like that, It never seems to show up in Treize's character. It might just be a delusion. It might just be him missing her. It could be a lot of things. I'm not too sure. They never sort of go into it much after that.
So I ask because they never do what you seem to have just said, where he says to have Lady Une rest in peace. No acknowledgement of that. Nothing. Oh. I mean, I might have had my head turned for the half second that they acknowledge it. I didn't see it at any point.
I mean, maybe he says it literally in the English version of it. He says that basically word for word.
I understand. And that's why I'm saying in the Japanese, I didn't see any of that.
That's interesting. I wonder why they did that.
But I will note, too, that rather than it being a wholly delusional thing, if they acknowledge that she is dead in that script, it's probably to denote the fact that he feels her spirit nearby, because even if this is a real robo or anything, and disregarding the glow for a second, it is not uncommon in most anime, supernatural or otherwise, to have a moment where you get to have that connection with a loved one that is passed for a brief moment after they've recently been separated from you. I would say here that's probably the case, and it's just a final goodbye from that perspective.
Yeah, and you don't even need to go to be like a literal spirit. Like, it could just be Treize, that's his process of grieving. And so, like,
yes.
And I think having the ghost there might seem silly, but it really does, especially if in Japanese they're not saying rest in peace, to hammer home this point of like how he actually did feel about her, because you, as a first-time viewer, definitely weren't sure what that lesson is. But this moment makes me look back at episode 7 when Rufei's about to defeat Lady Une on that ship, and then Treize stops the fight to get him to challenge him directly. It makes me think he's doing that to protect her from defeat, because he has no reason to think that Wu-Fei won't kill her outright. And he's like, well, I'm the real prize anyway, so just come after me, spare her. And so I like now you can kind of look back at all these moments, and they actually have us do that. And so that we go back and see him, not shooting the target birds and waiting for an actual bird to appear to shoot it, but then following that with him with these caged birds, letting them loose that will later come back. Like, now we get to look at these differently after halfway through as he's reflecting on them, and we're getting, we're able to piece together more of a tapestry of Treize compared to the Relina episode, where she's just sort of like, this happened, and this happened, and then this happened. I'm his hero. And we're like, yeah, but we already knew that. Yeah. Like, Relina, you were already there. You haven't had your biggest transformations yet. But Treize, we don't really know that much about already. We came in with a lot of assumptions I think they wanted us to, and they've been slowly breaking them away, but with the way humans do, we try to figure out how it fits into our preconceived notions already. But then he keeps, saying, he's got a whole episode now where he says things, he has this phrasing, steer history in the right direction, restrictions breed new freedom, he's worried that colonies have a fake peace, and worries that their true feelings are boiling underneath and will erupt at an inconvenient time. He finds life to be precious and irreplaceable. He loves the landscape that he's being driven through on his way to his house arrest, and laments that Romafella was built to protect these lands and now has done something different. The purpose of battles is not limited to making ideals into reality. Victory is not as important as an attitude towards fighting. He has thoughts on what it means for the Gundams to be fighting, but then says, but I don't want to delve into that anymore because I don't have a right to have an opinion on this at this time. Like, it's just sort of a very different view from this kind of autocratic mastermind warmonger that we thought we were getting at the beginning. And, we've had these images to kind of puzzle us a bit, but now it's just sort of, and I love this idea of doing a recap from this villain's point of view, this quote-unquote villain's point of view. Gundam Seed, notorious for having four recap episodes in its 50-episode series, actually has one interesting one from the villain's point of view, but he's like going crazy and is like talking, is like telling the story of the recap to himself, like other versions of himself in the room with him, and not always remembering them right. So it's another interesting one in a show that is mostly uninteresting and is slowed down by every 10 episodes there being a goddamn recap episode. of a show that you didn't need a recap for because you're already remaking a very famous show with it. So like I like this idea of coming at it. The problem with that villain in Seed is he's not that interesting. He's just sort of a crazy man. Treize, there's a lot to explore here, and sort of letting us have Lady Un's point of view, one, makes sense because she was in space and he wasn't, but two, kind of helps cement, she got to show it off more with her actions than Treize has up till this point. So, you know, we can sort of recontextualize her more, but it is nice to kind of have that there as well. Yeah, I don't know, I get, so like I said, I get worked up as he's sort of saying rest in peace, and like I'm like, oh, this is actually a surprisingly moving recap episode, and last week I was tuning in and out. You know, not paying, even though that's an episode I've seen the least because I often skip it when I watch the show again. But this episode, but this episode I was actually surprised, sort of being engrossed. I'm like, I don't know, I want to know how he's feeling about these moments and how he's viewing them and how it compares to what you have seen, Bob, and what I know is coming. Because that's sort of interesting, trying to fit the pieces of this man together. And I don't think I still fully have it. And that's what makes it easy to watch a show like this as many times as I have.
No, I get where you're coming from, and I feel like it's interesting to see these pieces, but something still eludes me, and I don't know if it's that you still have a piece of knowledge that I don't or not. But what is supposed to be the importance of the bird he shoots? What is the point of that cardinal he shoots? Is that supposed to be representative of him cutting ties with Zex in order for him to become oh god, I'm forgetting his proper name. Zex's
Miliardo
Peacecraft name. Miliardo, thank you. Yeah. Is it him shooting that person down being the way that he's able to rightfully separate him and let him go on his merry way?
Aha. So no. So the shooting of the bird actually happens around like episode 3. And what he actually says in the original show is shoot him down for me, Zex, because Zex is going to go after the Gundams again. What it actually, we come in and we're like, oh, this man, he's just out for blood. That's what they want us to think. But then, 20 episodes later, when he's going off on Romerfeller in a Leo and shooting at the mobile dolls, that's the real implication of that moment. He's not interested in battle for decorum or for rule or power. Human will is at its brightest when people are fighting and when they have something to fight for. And so his lament and why he wants to be a loser is that he doesn't have anything to fight for anymore. And Romerfeller doesn't want to fight for anything. They just want control, and they don't want it through fighting. They want it through utter dominance. And humankind can't evolve that way. Humankind can't be at its best that way. So that it's really a hint that when we get to that scene where he's in the Leo fighting the mobile dolls, we're not blindsided by it. It's already sort of tucked away in the back of our head that he's not interested in battles against buttons and dummies and dolls. There's no purpose to that. Yeah.
No, I mean, at that point, it's just mind removal. It's tedium. It has no soul.
But when he says life is precious, that colors now why he wouldn't want wars to be fought with the push of a button like the doctors are worried about with this mobile doll technology. Why we wouldn't want this world of conflict being decided with drones and atomic bombs rather than sort of boots on the ground, because that cost now resonates with all of humanity. Treize seems to find something beautiful about two people believing in something so strongly they're willing to put their life at risk for it. And that is where he thinks that human potential lies and where our ability to grow and change and evolve lies. And that was what he was trying to teach Lady Un. And seemed to have a difficult time doing. And you can understand why those people, like those guys in the underwater episode with Zex and the guy that tries to kill Lady Un, are sort of kind of taking it the wrong way. Because they're just like, battle is great. We kill them all and then we win. And Treize, has learned from the Gundams that
it's not about winning.
It's not about winning. He might have thought that at the beginning, but even then he wanted to win to be hated by the world, to continue to inspire his troops for what their real thing was going to be before Romerfeller came and said, we're going to do this instead. This seems to be going well. We like these mobile dolls. This is the plan. And Treize is like, fuck. Well, I don't like this, right? He says history is steering in the wrong direction. This isn't great. I have no place in it if that's the world you want.
His whole goal was to become a hated figure?
Well, that's what he wanted at the time. It's not his ultimate goal. We'll find that out later on. But even then, we might not actually know what that ultimate goal was, because he's going to have to change now that he's under house arrest if he wants to affect change again and be a principal member of history going forward. And so he's probably going to have to sit back and watch what the Gundams are doing and learn from them.
I will say I'm excited for what we got a glimpse of at the end. I'm going to not name it, but that's... I won't lie, Skeyhill. I would love to get a copy of that to build, because I do love the weapon that it wields.
That is the master grade. This Gundam that we won't name is the master grade. I am so excited to build. I will be building it after I get to the point where I can finish the perfect grade Wing Zero. It was the first Gundam model I ever made. And I will tell that story of how that came into my possession when we get a little more information about it. And around that time, I'll also be able to tell you why it's my favorite Gundam, because you don't quite know the philosophy behind its design just yet.
Sure, and I figure that it's not going to happen next week, but I do look forward to that story.
A little teaser for next week. So excited for next week's episode. Really fun episode. We get to see some fun characters we haven't seen for a bit, and we get an introduction to sort of one of our last major players in the series. So that will be fun too. One of our last major players? Yeah, we still have, I would say, maybe 1.5-ish major characters left to unveil. One of them we're going to get smack dab next episode. You won't be able to avoid them. And that character is another interesting puzzle to kind of figure out.
But I will also note one last thing before we maybe go the way we go.
Yeah.
And that's being glad that Sally Poe, we got that minor part of I believe it is a recap from a couple episodes back.
Correct.
Of her finding the Wing Gundam stashed in the water there.
Yep.
With the hope that maybe we can have Hero pick up his Wing Gundam again, as opposed to having to worry about who's going to get the Wing Zero and have to deal with the Berserk mode.
Yeah, the Wing Zero left off in the hands of those doctors as far as we knew. Who knows what they plan to do with it. Yeah, Sally Poe still alive and kicking, finding that Wing Zero, trying to salvage it just the same way that the Catra's friends rescued the Sandrock Gundam from the base as well. So hopefully we'll see how that all plays out and how the Gundam shuffling keeps going on in the future, since most of the only really Wu Fei and Duo have machines now and they got upgraded versions of them. Some good stuff coming on the way. Very excited for what we have coming down the pike in Gundam Wing.
Yeah, I'm also looking forward to when we eventually acknowledge Troa again in one fashion or another.
Maybe.
I say it in that way because while I hold that without having a proper death on screen, you've basically confirmed for me in one way or another that Lady Une is no more. Fine. I don't believe Troa is dead yet. And I'm going to maintain that until I've been given on-screen proof.
A man with hope. It's infectious, Bob.
I'm a fucking shonen hero. What do you expect?
I know, maybe you're more of a Catra than a Duo.
You know, it's funny you say that. In one way, I can see where you would take that because my empathy is something that you've known over the course of the past 15 years. But I see myself, I think it's more accurate to say that I am a Catra, but I want to be a Duo.
Yeah, that's what I would think too. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's fair.
But that's okay. You can just sort of have a little both. All right, on the way we go.
Like sand through the hourglass, this is the way that we go.
So for me this week, I've talked about this a little bit, and it felt fitting for this week because of the type of episode we had with Treize and what I'll talk about in the nerd corner. This idea of, we've been taught in this cottage industry of screenwriting guruism, the audience needs X to know what's going on and blah, 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 and they need to be told this and spoon-fed that and blah, blah, blah. And I think that limits that insults us and also limits our participation and our rewatchability of these shows. Now, Netflix doesn't really seem to care anymore. It just wants you to care about one thing or lot for, 3 weeks at a time, and then move on to the next thing that they've made and care about that and talk about that on Twitter. So, if you really want to be successful, don't listen to what I'm about to say. But if you want to make something that stands the test of time, then you don't have to tell us everything. What I like about Treize, what's fun about Treize and some of these other characters in the show is that each time I come back, there's something new to discover, there's something new to find out. But also as I get older and as I change and I grow, I look at them differently too. And so it's not just sort of what's in the show, but the conversation I get to have changes because my voice has changed. You could say matured, you could say evolved, you could say just completely broke down and built something else up new. All that's fine. It's all there. And that show that then to me feels sort of living and breathing. And it's a concept I first noticed in Fully Cooley, which is an easy show to watch because it's only 6 episodes and is about sort of growing up. And first time I watched it when I was the protagonist's age, and then I watched in high school, and then in college, and then after college, and then even older than that. And like having that perspective on that time period, but remembering being in that time period and grappling with that show, like it breathed, it lived with you, it grew with you. Like that is sort of what you want the goal, because that makes the show outside of culture and outside of time and place resonant and speaking. And there are reasons why we talk about Greek plays 50,000 years later, but a bestseller from 1990 we just won't remember anymore. And we would be lucky if it were in a bargain bin and not in a dump somewhere. Like that's sort of the way you want to go at it. And part of that is just like you need to sort of know who your character is and be realistic with quotes because we're anime, have like an integrity to them so that nothing is coming out of left field. But you don't have to tell it to us. You can sort of hint. You can demonstrate. You can let their actions be interpretable. And that way everybody can kind of bring what they need to at that time and sort of grow and learn or just react accordingly. That's sort of the way to go. And that's the fun thing that Gundam does for most of its characters when it gives them the time to do that. I think Treize is one of their better successes despite not having them in there as much as you might expect when you look back at the show. So those are my thoughts on what to do screenwriting-wise week they go. Don't be afraid to be a little ambiguous and vague as long as you're being honest to the story and the characters you're dealing with. Bob, where did you go this week?
Well, it took me a moment to actually pull something together while you were doing your piece. I'm going to say this. It's somewhat a joke, but it is somewhat sincere. If you have a sword, don't forget about it. Please use it. Now, it's a joke because I'm referencing the fact that for the entire time that Domon is being assaulted, and for at least 3/4 of the episode, he completely forgets that he has a sword that he could be using, that he has actively cut down humongous trees in the middle of the Guyana Highlands with, and doesn't think, oh, well, I'm able to use this sword. It's not as bad as I thought. No. It takes him being assaulted by a giant mecha to pull out his sword and realize, oh, hey, I can channel this sense of calm into the sword and it becomes worthwhile. I wonder if I can do that with my Gundam. So it's a bit of a joke there, but I also mean it in a sincere way. It does not have to be a literal sword, but know your strengths and don't forget about them. Be sure to use them. When it comes to the world around us, it is very easy to feel overwhelmed, much like Domon is. But I believe that you have more strength than you believe in your moment of frustration, in your moment of fear. Rely on that. Use it to your best effect. Whether that means to vote, I'm going to hang on that again, considering what just happened a few days ago, or whether that is being able to use charm and wit over physical force, or being able to recognize that you're okay on your own if someone is poor to you in a relationship. You have several strengths, and it's hard to recognize them in the moment. Hopefully this will stick with you as I try to remind myself on the daily.
All right, some great words of wisdom there for you all. Now, let us undermine them by going to a silly place called the Nerd Corner.
Let's take a walk to the Nerd Corner, where we will talk about a lot of nerd stuff. Yeah.
So my Nerd Corner, as I promised, sort of ties into my Way We Go and my talking about Treize, this wonderful movie I was reminded of, I watched again. called Burning from Korea. Came out in 2018. It had a small theatrical run after it won a prize at Cannes. So I got to see it then, and I sort of enjoyed it. And then I watched it again, and I actually loved it much more. Here's sort of my synopsis of it. It is a mystery film, a murder mystery film that is not interested in solving the murder mystery, nor in confirming if there was even a murder. I love it. It sort of gives me everything I want in a mystery movie, and I haven't been so satisfied by one since Godard's Alphaville. It is exactly what I was talking about. It's interested in implying a lot of things and giving you a lot of information that like feels clustered and scattered, but like actually could fit together. And like you get to be in the mind of this protagonist trying to figure out between all these possible conspiracy theories and being unsure and sort of living in that mode. And I think that's great. And it's very easy to rewatch. I could rewatch it again today if I had time and didn't have a million other things to deal with or watch. So I highly recommend it. Burning. It's a bit tricky to find in America, but it is streaming in certain places if you're willing to pay a little for it. Very much worth your time. Great film. Bob, what do you got this week?
This week, I'm going to go ahead and point out that much to Skeyhill's chagrin, I'm a genre fan. I'm a big old genre fan. And also ADH brain before I forget. When Skeyhill said cons, he didn't mean like going to a convention. He meant the CANNES, the Cannes Film Festival, a very illustrious award-driven film festival. There's going to be at least 2 of our 7 listeners that might think that you meant a Comic-Con. So I just wanted to be sure.
I think they're smart enough.
Well, and I'm glad that you said it and that I got you to say it. So I would suggest going and looking at a channel called Dead Meat. Yes, Dead Meat. This channel is apparently an offshoot of another channel that used to be some level popular called Drunk Disney, where people would get drunk, watch Disney, and then talk about it. This one is all about horror stuff. They have 2 main projects that they do weekly. One is a podcast. They do post it on YouTube and have it as like a visual podcast besides something that you could probably listen to on Spotify or what have you. The other one is a series called The Kill Count. The Kill Count is a review retrospective on several different films in the horror genre. They give you a summary of the film. They will let you know when major spoilers come into play. They will count each body that drops and the way in which they drop. At the end of the story, after a culmination of what that person, James A. Janice, goes over and gives his opinion on it, he then goes over to the numbers where he shows who died, how many, how it's split, and gives a golden chainsaw and a I forget what he calls it. It's not bronze or silver. It's just like lamest kill, I think.
Okay.
Well, because when you watch a horror movie,
yes,
it is very easy to see what kills are amazing based on a production perspective, from a story writing perspective, so on and so forth.
Yes.
Versus like a kill off screen that has no real meaning besides having a minor scare to show that, oh God, bodies are hitting the floor. If you are a filmmaker, if you like the horror genre, which as this person and a few other people that I watch that I may talk about in another nerd corner state, a lot of people don't pay horror mind because they believe it is always schlock. This is untrue. There is plenty of schlock, but good horror relies on not just the idea of graphics or creating tension and jump scares. I'm looking at you, the aughts and 2010s. But it also looks to talk about culture, society, the innate fears that we hold within ourselves, and make statements about our lives. So there is a difference between watching something like a variation on Dracula, like the Hammer films version, or watching the one that was done by Francis Ford Coppola, or watching a culturally driven one like Blackula, so on and so forth.
I will... first of all, I think this is a great thing for horror fans out there. Great for them. I will actually defend the horror-going audience. I don't think most people have that interpretation of sort of down poo-pooing on horror. I think it's a genre that always does very well, whether the film is good or not. So the average audience clearly likes it, and I think horror fans know sort of what can underlie a truth of a horror film and sort of the cultural critiques it can provide. I think there are just sort of like there's like really you have like your very low new critics that are like, yeah, Star Wars is great. Then you have your highbrow critics that are like, hey, Burning, check that out. And then you got sort of the bell curve of the critics that are like, meh, horror films, why would you waste your time? Don't bother, it's just blood. I think these are really the people you're kind of leveraging who are trying to push a narrative that I don't think most people actually buy. Though they are out there and you shouldn't listen to them.
Yeah, well, I mean, there might be a time where I convince you, Patrick Skeyhill, to do some sort of a horror movie podcast with me, but I don't know how likely that is.
Well, it depends.
I will say this aloud, though, one, to hold myself accountable, but two, because there are plenty of great films that I would never have watched because they would never have been on my radar.
Yeah.
Things like Record versus the poorly adapted American version, Quarantine. They are night and day in terms of the way that they go about their filming process, their story, their plot line, their everything. Yeah,
when we take these sort of foreign horror films and we want to make them, it's mostly to make money. Like, that's all you're doing. Because the original one's already well known and does well enough even in America. And they just thought, like...
The Ring versus Ringu.
Yes, exactly. Like, you get it all the time, or even both Pulses. Like, it's unfortunate that we do this. They come and grab it. The American Ring, actually, a little more successful than some of these other ones have been. Some effort seems to have been put into it, compared to the other ones that are like, all right, let's do this again. Let's go on the carousel again and spit out a new thing. I guess nowadays it'd be like, all right, let's put this thing right to Netflix, make a couple of 100,000, and go on with our lives. It's like a Duplass
Do you mean
kind of
something
model.
like Truth or Dare?
Yeah. Well, that did go into theaters, frustratingly enough.
Oh, I know.
And then they made another one. Like, whatever. Okay, fine.
It got a sequel?
Yeah, it got a sequel. Because you know why, Bob? Because it's like, here's a horror. Because Blumhouse knows their demographics. High school kids... You love horror movies, and then you set it at a high school, and now they can sort of imagine what it would be like if they were in the high school. Fine. Of course it was going to make money. Because the high school audience was propelling this. Well, they're just making out in the theater anyway. So, like, whatever.
To be fair, I saw, to finish this off, the kill list, or the kill count, rather, that all the movies I've mentioned were on this and have had great interpretations of the pacing, the story structure, how acting is done, all of this. It is not just, hey, let's do a Cinema Sins knockoff. This is a genuinely good channel and series to watch. I highly recommend it. And I'll say that while the monster in Truth or Dare is, as James A. Janice points out, it's a Snapchat filter.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Some of the practical effects are truly solid, and some of the ways that they twist around things, while at times very 1988 in terms of how they get there, are still ways that you could see things play out. They make sense as opposed to just T-boning into itself.
Yeah, again, I think especially from Blumhouse, I think most horror films can sort of avoid, I don't know, I think they're better than some people give them credit for.
Blumhouse and A24 are great houses to get movies from because they can keep things low budget and actually put out worthwhile stories as opposed to just, hey, we're Universal, let's shit out a dark universe.
Well... I don't want to get into a whole rant about how Marvel has ruined movies, but yeah, I mean,
that's what we're going to say for our horror movie podcast.
A24 and Blumhouse actually, despite having very very similar business models actually have different demographics that they service, and so it affects the content that they make, which could be an interesting episode in and of itself. But yes, check it out. For all the plenty of genre fans out there, check out that link. It does sound interesting. And if you're interested in getting out of your comfort zone, check out Burning. Links in the show notes below. Well, as we wrap up, we first have to thank Lev Van Rensselaer on the audio boards for keeping us sounding smooth and slick. And then, of course, let me thank my co-host this season, Bob Skerry. Bob, you got any plugs?
Of course I do. Hey, hi, Worldwide Sentai. This is Bob Skerry VOA coming at you live from Zaku Talk headquarters. You can find me on Twitch, Twitter, Instagram, and a slew of other places by my handle, Bob Skerry VOA. You can also go to bobskerryvoa.com to listen to my commercial, promotion, narration, and character demos, because in fact, VOA stands for voiceover artist. Hire me. I love doing voices. I need to be doing voices more often. And if you have a job, we can talk about it.
And I am your host, Patrick Scale. You can find my features, documentaries, short films, video essays, animations, behind-the-scenes footage, and so much more at QuixoticUnited.com and social media, presumably with a similar-sounding name. Thank you all for listening. Bob, tell the audience why your car is powered by fish.
Surprisingly enough, sardines filled with oil. Oil is flammable. I shoot flaming fish out of the ass of my car.